Hi there, I'm Seth, the EFI guy, and I'm here today to show you how I go about a no-start diagnostic on a Holley EFI equipped vehicle. This is a Dodge Ram 2007 that we have the Holley Dominator on. This is running the version 3, as you can see up here. Version 3 firmware and software, which you need to run for the new, for all the Chryslers and for the Ford mod motors. Where are we going to start here? Well, I'll tell you, this is a vehicle that actually really is a no start. It's one that I fitted the Dominator to, and the customer called, and one morning it just didn't start, so had it towed in, and we're going to look at that. The other thing we're going to do is look at how to make a system log. So this is also a tutorial on making and understanding, I don't go too far into it, but understanding a system log, which basically looks at cam crank sensors and their relationship and the signal between the cam and crank sensor visually. So let's start. We're going to connect to the ECU, turn our ignition on here. USB link, connect. I already downloaded it, but if I didn't download it, I would hit that USB link and download from the ECU first. Now we're online. A good way to tell if you're online, well, now you can usually see the barrel or the battery jumping around a little bit, but I just step on the throttle position and you can tell you're online there. Also shows you're online right here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the gauge panel, and this is a no start. And a few things that we know we need in order to start are fuel pressure, right here, RPM, which means it's getting an RPM signal, and well, that's about it. As long as you read fuel pressure and RPM, if you are reading both of those and you don't have a signal starting, you can look at injector pulse width down here. You should have something above 6 to 15 milliseconds, maybe even higher milliseconds than that. If you are showing that you have fuel and you have signals, then chances are you may not have spark, or you may have a flooded engine. It's certainly, the ECU is pretty smart, but it can't tell you if you have a flooded engine. So next thing you're going to actually do is go under the hood and check your spark plugs, see if you actually have spark, and see if they're soaking wet. So in this case, I think you'll actually be you'll be able to hear on the audio when I'm cranking it. So I'm going to crank it here. And well, right now I don't have, okay, here comes my fuel pressure. But you see I have no RPM at all. Now, I'll tell you that when I first got this vehicle in and I was cranking it, I had RPM showing, and then it would sync, and then the sync would go out and it would say stall. It was basically flashing back and forth between RPM, sync, stall, RPM, sync, stall. Sometimes it would actually even catch, RPM would jump a little bit, and you'd see the word sync here a lot. If I have time in this, I'll even open one of those logs and show you. So again, no RPM. So we know that without reading RPM, we don't have a proper cam and crank signal, or a proper relation between the cam and crank signal. So the way we see that is by using a system log. And the way we do a system log, you can't just click this keyboard like you would a regular log. So we have to set up a system log. So set up ECU logging. Usually it's under normal data log. We select system log. We can do triggered. Sometimes I like to do triggered with something like throttle position at, I don't know, 40%. That way I know when I touch it 40%, it's going to trigger. If you do immediate, it just seems to trigger these things all the time. So I prefer not to do immediate. Or in this case, let's see, I could do oil pressure while we're cranking. If we see oil pressure, let's say greater than 3 psi. Let's do that. So as soon as the oil pressure goes greater than 3 psi, I will get a system log for 30 seconds. And I really don't need 30 seconds to log. I'll do 15 seconds of a log. That's plenty. We're not going to crank for more than 15 seconds anyway. Hit OK. Now the next time I crank this and oil pressure goes above 3, it's going to start that system log, and I need to keep cranking to record it. So here we go. Okay, so it's probably started now. I'm going to hold it down for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Just a little tip that when you are doing a log and when it actually activates the log, you'll see that all the numbers there just kind of stall. And it's just a little tip. If you actually see the numbers stall, that means it starts recording. So there's no other, unfortunately they don't really have any other way to show whether it is logging. It's funny, I never looked, but I don't think there's any way you can put in here to say logging status, internal logging status. So we're going to close this. Now in order to download your data log, you have to be offline. You download ECU data logs. Okay, here's our date, because we did sync the time. And I tell you right now that I don't think that's an actual real log. We'll download it. These are from the day before, so this is, let's see, today we are August 26th, but here it's August 26th, 9:08 p.m. Here's some logs from the other day that I'll show you, but I think that 16,000 bytes is not going to be good, but we're going to download it and see. Close. Open, sorry, not open data log, open system log, and that was the one from today. And there's no RPM there. There's nothing. That's not, you can see the time, 2 seconds. Okay. That's not a good log. This happened to me before, and I haven't looked into it, but sometimes I think that when you set up the ECU logging this way, I'm starting to think that you should always turn your power off first, like you would for any system change. Anytime you make a change to the system ICFs here, which you have to do with the USB not connected, and you upload that change, turn the key off for 10-15 seconds, power down the ECU, power it back up. So you can hear I just powered it back up. USB link. Says there are no changes. My ECU time is connected. I'm going to try this system log again. Here we go. Okay, you kind of saw it stall there and cranking for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. No change at all in the RPM the whole time. Give it a second here. Okay, go offline. Download ECU data logs. Okay, here we go. This is better. We have 9:11 p.m. So, and even here we had one after that. So what happened, it went through the 15 seconds and then started another one. I'm going to delete that and delete these. Keep it clean in here. I'm going to download this one. Download complete. Close. Open system log. Give me 1 second here. this is the one we just did. This one was bogus. Get that out of here. Yes. Open up this one that we just made at 9:11 p.m. No RPM, right? What do we have? Cam, crank. Okay, here we go. So, what are we looking at here? You know what? This isn't the best example to show you. I'm going to start with an example that has both a cam and crank sensor. I can actually see this actually did have one crank sensor shown, one crank pulse here. But I'm going to open one that I took the other day, yesterday. Ah, this is a great one to look at. Okay, so this is the same truck, and this is where I had the truck, the RPM was sinking, and then it was showing me a couple hundred, then it was cutting out, okay? This is the red line here. So right now, just to make things clean, we've only selected RPM, crank, and cam. The crank and cam is a, well, you think it would be like a 0 to 1. On the cam, I think it's a 1 to 2. Everything else we'll leave off for now. We don't need to look at anything else. Battery, it's not a bad idea just to, might as well click your battery in there, because if you go below, let's say 10.5 and you're cranking, that could be something to look at. We just take our cursor over. We're going to look at RPM. This is when I was cranking the other day, and I did see RPM, and then I was still cranking and had no RPM. These blue lines, let's zoom in, which I just drag, and let's see, left click, you drag, and then you release, and it zooms in. So now we can see it more clearly as we zoom in. Let's zoom in even more. There's going to be a cam pattern, which the trisors look very strange. This is the cam pattern, so blue. And there's a crank pattern. And in this, we actually see a good cam and crank pattern. We don't exactly know what the crank pattern is on this. I think it's like this is a 24 tooth, but whatever. And as you can see, when we have cam signal and we have crank signal, we have RPM. Then I'm still cranking, and look what happens here. My cam signal is still there, my crank signal goes away, and so does my RPM. RPM reading 0, that's when it's going to read stall. And it's going to read 476, it's going to sync, and it's going to stall. So now understanding that, I'll show you the one again that we just made, which I showed no RPM at all. That was 9:11 p.m. right here. So we have, as we saw before, here's our battery voltage. Not quite the best, but during cranking, as long as we have above 10.5 volts, we should be able to see our signals. We have no RPM. Let's zoom in right here, because I see this. I actually do have a little bit of a crank signal. So as far as a diagnostic perspective, if I ever see any crank signal at all, if it's not just a flat line, I can say, okay, my wiring between the ECU and the crank signal is intact. Now, maybe intermittently intact. There may be a loose connection somewhere. This could be a corroded wire, could be a wire that's like worn through and making bad contact, but we know that we do have contact with our crank signal. We knew that the ECU was working, so we can kind of go into other diagnostics, which I think is beyond the scope of this video, but I now showed you what I look for when I have a no start on the Holley EFI. And I showed you how to make a system log and a little bit on how to read a system log. If there's, in the future, maybe I'll make another one on some of these AD counts and stuff, a few more things to look when you have an intermittent sync problem, but I hope that helps, and look for more of my videos on YouTube.